Dr. Robert Chen rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the massive whiteboard in front of him. Numbers, symbols, and diagrams covered every inch of it. Some were crossed out. Others had question marks beside them. All of them represented months of frustration. For half a year now, he and his team at the Riverside Quantum Computing Institute had been stuck on one problem. Just one. It should have been simple, at least that's what they thought when they started. They needed to create a better algorithm, a kind of digital recipe that would help quantum computers make fewer mistakes. But no matter what they tried, nothing worked. Robert wasn't alone in this struggle. His team included some of the smartest people he'd ever met. They'd called in experts from the biggest universities in the country. Mathematicians flew in from overseas. Computer scientists who'd written books on the subject spent weeks in their lab. Everyone had an idea. Everyone had a theory. But when they tested these ideas, the results were always the same. Failure. The pressure was getting worse. The people funding their research were losing patience. There had been meetings. Uncomfortable meetings where men in expensive suits asked pointed questions about progress and timelines. The unspoken threat hung in the air. Fix this soon or we pull the money. Robert sometimes wondered if they were chasing something impossible. Maybe the solution didn't exist. Maybe they were trying to solve a puzzle that had no answer. But he couldn't give up. Not yet. Across the city, in a very different world, 8-year-old Maya Rodriguez sat at her desk in Mrs. Patterson's third-grade classroom. Her math worksheet lay in front of her, finished. She'd completed all 20 problems in less than 10 minutes. Now she was doing what she always did when she finished early, drawing. Her pencil moved across the margins of her paper, creating patterns. Circles connected to triangles, lines that curved and intersected in ways that seemed random but weren't. Maya didn't think about what she was drawing. Her hand just moved, following some instinct she couldn't explain. Mrs. Patterson had stopped trying to challenge Maya months ago. At first, she'd given her 4th-grade work. Maya finished it in minutes. 5th-grade math? Same result. The teacher even borrowed a middle school textbook once. Maya worked through the problems like they were simple addition. But here's the thing. Maya wasn't trying to show off. She wasn't even aware she was doing anything special. To her, the math just made sense. Numbers and patterns spoke to her in a language that felt as natural as breathing. While other kids struggled with multiplication tables, Maya saw the relationships between numbers like she was reading a story. Her classmates had mixed feelings about her. Some thought she was cool. Others called her weird. Maya didn't mind much. She had a few good friends, and that was enough. At recess, she played soccer and told jokes just like everyone else. The genius stuff only showed up during class. Every day after school, Maya's life followed the same routine. Her mother, Carmen, would pick her up and they'd go home for a quick snack. Then, around 5 o'clock, they'd drive to the Riverside Institute where Carmen worked as a janitor. Carmen had been cleaning the Institute's offices and laboratories for 3 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and had good benefits. As a single mother, Carmen did what she had to do. Some nights she worked until 9 or 10, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans in buildings where people made more in a month than she made in a year. Maya never complained about these evenings. In fact, she loved them. While her mother worked, Maya would sit in the break room doing homework. But once that was done, the real adventure began. The Institute after hours was like a secret world. The hallways were quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, and everywhere Maya looked there were interesting things. Whiteboards covered in mysterious equations, computer screens displaying colorful graphs, papers with diagrams that looked like art. Carmen had rules, of course. Don't touch anything. Don't go into locked rooms. Stay where I can find you. Maya followed these rules mostly. She didn't touch things. She just looked. And boy, did she look. She'd peek into offices where researchers had left their work scattered across desks. She'd study the drawings on whiteboards, trying to understand what the symbols meant. She didn't know the technical terms. She'd never heard of quantum mechanics or computational theory. But the patterns fascinated her. To Maya, these equations and diagrams were puzzles. Beautiful, complex puzzles. Sometimes she'd see something that didn't look right to her. A diagram where the lines didn't connect in a way that made sense. An equation where the balance felt off. She couldn't have explained why she thought these things. She just felt it. The way you might feel that a piece of music is slightly out of tune. This particular Thursday evening started like any other. Carmen pushed her cleaning cart through the hallways while Maya finished her homework in the break room. It was a spelling assignment this time, boring but quick. Within 20 minutes, she was done. Maya wandered into the hallway, following the sound of voices. She knew where they were coming from, the big conference room on the 3rd floor. Dr. Chen's team often worked late, and Maya had seen them before. They always looked stressed, always serious. Tonight was no different. She stood in the doorway, small and unnoticed, watching the adults argue. There were 6 of them in the room, all staring at screens and whiteboards, gesturing wildly as they talked. Their voices overlapped. "We've already tried that approach. What if we modify the input parameters? The error rate is still too high. Maybe we're thinking about this wrong." Maya's eyes drifted to the whiteboard. It was covered in diagrams and equations, layers upon layers of them. But one section caught her attention. There was a circuit diagram, a representation of how information would flow through a quantum computer. To the adults in the room, it was a sophisticated technical drawing. To Maya, it just looked wrong. She couldn't have told you why it looked wrong. She didn't know the rules these scientists were following. She just saw a pattern that didn't complete itself the way it should. It was like looking at a puzzle with a piece jammed into the wrong spot. Sure, it fit, but it didn't belong there. Without really thinking about it, Maya walked into the room. Nobody noticed her. They were too busy debating. She picked up a marker from the tray and moved to an empty section of the whiteboard. Her hand started moving, drawing the same kinds of patterns she always drew in the margins of her schoolwork, circles and lines and connections. But this time, she incorporated parts of the diagram she'd been looking at. She made loops smaller. She connected things that weren't connected before. She mirrored certain elements because that's what felt right. She wasn't thinking about quantum computers or algorithms. She was just completing a pattern the way her instincts told her it should be completed. To her, it was as simple as coloring inside the lines or humming along to a familiar song. She had no idea she was about to change everything. Maya was halfway through her drawing when someone finally noticed her. Dr. Lisa Park, the youngest scientist on the team, was reaching for her coffee when she glanced toward the whiteboard. She froze mid-reach. Dr. Chen?" Her voice cut through the heated discussion. "There's a child drawing on your whiteboard." The room went silent. All 6 scientists turned to look. There stood Maya, blue marker in hand, surrounded by the geometric patterns she'd just created. Her eyes went wide. She hadn't meant to interrupt. She hadn't meant to be seen at all. "Oh no." Carmen's voice came from the doorway. She'd been cleaning the office next door when she realized Maya wasn't in the break room. "I'm so sorry. Maya, come here right now." Maya's face flushed red. She dropped the marker back into the tray and started walking toward her mother, her eyes fixed on the floor. She'd broken the rules. She'd touched things. Her mother was going to be so upset. But Dr. Chen held up his hand. "Wait," he said softly. He wasn't looking at Maya. He was looking at the whiteboard, at the patterns she'd drawn. His head tilted slightly to the side. "Just wait a second." Carmen stopped in the doorway, confused. Maya stood frozen between the whiteboard and her mother, unsure what to do. The other scientists were staring at Dr. Chen now, wondering what he was seeing that they weren't. Dr. Chen walked slowly toward the whiteboard. His eyes moved back and forth between his team's complex equations and Maya's simple drawings. There was something there, something that looked almost familiar, the way she'd connected certain elements, the loops she'd created, the mirroring pattern. He crouched down to Maya's eye level. His voice was gentle. "Can you tell me why you drew it this way?" Maya shrugged, still nervous. "It just looked like it needed to go together like this." Her voice was barely above a whisper, like a puzzle. "The pieces weren't fitting right, so She trailed off, not knowing how to explain. Dr. Chen pointed to one section of her drawing. "What about this part? Why did you make this loop smaller?" "Because the big one didn't match the other side," Maya said, her confidence growing just a little. "See? If you make it smaller here and then do the same thing over there, it balances out. Everything connects better." The scientists exchanged glances. Dr. Park raised her eyebrows. Another team member, Dr. James Wu, let out a small laugh. Not a mean laugh, more like disbelief. This was a child's random doodle. It couldn't possibly mean anything relevant to their work. But Dr. Park was already pulling out her laptop. She was known for having an open mind, foreseeing possibilities where others saw dead ends. "Give me a minute," she said, typing quickly. "Lisa, come on," Dr. Wu said. "We can't waste time on—" "Just a minute," she repeated, her eyes fixed on her screen. She was translating Maya's visual patterns into mathematical notation, converting the simple shapes into the complex language of quantum computing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, then her typing slowed. She stopped completely, staring at her screen. Her mouth opened slightly. "What?" Dr. Chen asked. "What is it?" Dr. Park looked up at him, and her expression was somewhere between confusion and excitement. "Robert, you really need to see this." The other scientists gathered around her laptop. As they read what she'd written, the skeptical expressions began to change. Dr. Wu's smirk faded. Another researcher, Dr. Helen Brooks, put her hand over her mouth. Dr. Chen leaned closer to the screen, his eyes scanning line after line Maya had drawn. In the simplest possible terms, a completely new approach to their problem. Her loop represented a recursive pattern they'd never considered. The way she'd mirrored certain elements suggested a symmetry that could reduce errors in ways their current models couldn't. It was rough. It was incomplete. It was drawn in marker by an 8-year-old who didn't know the first thing about quantum physics. And it just might work. "This is impossible," Dr. Brooks whispered. "Apparently not," Dr. Park said quietly. Carmen stood in the doorway, completely lost. She cleaned these offices every night. She'd seen the equations and diagrams hundreds of times, but she'd never understood any of it. Now these scientists were staring at her daughter's drawing like it was the most important thing in the world. "I don't understand," Carmen said. "What's going on?" Dr. Chen stood up, running his hand through his hair. He looked at Maya, really looked at her for the first time. "Your daughter might have just solved a problem we've been working on for 6 months." "That's not possible," Carmen said automatically. "She's 8 years old. She doesn't know anything about your work." "I know," Dr. Chen said. "That's what makes this so incredible." Over the next 3 days, Maya's life became very strange. Dr. Chen called her and Carmen back to the institute. This time, Maya wasn't just a kid sitting in the break room. She was sitting at the conference table with the scientists. They showed her their diagrams. They asked her questions. Most of the time, Maya couldn't answer in words. She didn't know the technical terms. She couldn't explain the theories behind her intuitions. But when they showed her a problem, she could often see solutions. "What about this configuration?" Dr. Park would ask, showing Maya a screen full of complex circuits. Maya would study it for a moment, her head tilting slightly. "That line should curve the other way, and these two parts should switch places." The scientist would make the changes, run the simulations, and more often than not, the results improved. It wasn't that Maya understood quantum computing. She didn't, but she could see patterns in a way that bypassed normal logical thinking. Where the scientists had to work through layers of calculations and theories, Maya just looked and knew. She couldn't explain how she knew any more than you could explain how you know if something tastes good or sounds pleasant. She just did. The team worked around the clock. They took Maya's intuitive insights and translated them into rigorous mathematical proofs. They ran test after test, simulation after simulation. Each result brought them closer to something they'd almost given up on, a real breakthrough. Carmen watched all of this with growing anxiety. She didn't like how intensely these scientists were studying her daughter. She didn't like the long hours Maya was spending in the lab. This was supposed to be a child who played with dolls and watched cartoons, not someone solving problems for people with doctorate degrees. On Sunday evening, Dr. Park ran the final simulation. The team gathered around her computer, holding their collective breath. Numbers scrolled across the screen, graphs updated in real time, and then finally the result appeared. Error reduction, 43%. The room erupted. Dr. Wu let out a whoop. Dr. Brooks actually jumped up and down. Dr. Park covered her face with her hands, laughing and crying at the same time. They'd done it. After 6 months of failure, they'd finally done it. And it was all because of a little girl who'd seen a pattern nobody else could see. Dr. Chen walked over to where Maya sat, swinging her legs from a chair that was too tall for her. She was drawing again, creating more of her endless patterns on a piece of scratch paper. She looked up at him with curious eyes. "Maya," he said softly, "do you understand what you've done?" She thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "Not really. Did I help?" "Yes," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "You helped more than you can possibly imagine." That night, Dr. Chen sat alone in his office after everyone else had gone home. The final report was on his screen, complete with graphs and data that proved their solution worked. In the morning, he'd have to call the director. He'd have to explain that their breakthrough had come from an 8-year-old janitor's daughter who'd wandered into their lab on a Thursday evening. He knew what would happen next. The publicity, the attention, the pressure on this little girl who just wanted to draw patterns and play with her friends. He'd seen it before. Child prodigies crushed under the weight of the world's expectations, but he also knew he couldn't keep this quiet. This discovery would change the field. It would change technology, and Maya Rodriguez deserved credit for what she'd done, even if she didn't fully understand it herself. He picked up the phone to make the call that would change everything. The call to the director happened on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, everyone at the Riverside Institute knew the story. By Tuesday, the news had spread to other research facilities across the country. And by Wednesday morning, Carmen opened her apartment door to find 3 news vans parked on their street. "Mrs. Rodriguez, can we ask you a few questions about your daughter? How does it feel to have a genius child? Can Maya come out and talk to us?" Carmen slammed the door shut, her heart pounding. She pulled out her phone and called the institute, her hands shaking. This wasn't supposed to happen. Dr. Chen had promised they'd be careful. He'd promised to protect Maya's privacy. But news like this doesn't stay quiet. By the end of the week, Maya's story was everywhere. Not just local news, national news. Magazine articles, morning talk shows. Everyone wanted to know about the 8-year-old janitor's daughter who'd solved a problem that stumped the experts. The headlines got more dramatic with each passing day. Child prodigy revolutionizes quantum computing. Third grader outsmarts scientists with PhDs. Is this the smartest 8-year-old in America? Maya's school became a circus. Parents whispered in the hallways. Teachers didn't know how to act around her. Her classmates asked endless questions. "Are you really a genius? Can you solve any problem? What's it like being smarter than grown-ups?" Maya hated it. She just wanted things to go back to normal. She wanted to play soccer at recess without everyone watching her like she was going to do something amazing. She wanted to draw her patterns without people analyzing them for hidden meaning. The letters started arriving, hundreds of them. Universities offering scholarships for programs that wouldn't accept students for another 10 years. Private schools begging her to enroll, promising special accommodations. Tech companies wanting to fund her education in exchange for, well, the letters were vague about that part, but Carmen didn't trust it. Then there were the other letters. The angry ones, the skeptical ones, people who didn't believe an 8-year-old could possibly do what the news claimed. They said the institute was lying. They said Dr. Chen had used Maya as a cover for his own work. They said Carmen was exploiting her daughter for money and fame. Carmen read these letters late at night when Maya was asleep, and they made her stomach hurt. She'd never asked for any of this. She just wanted to give her daughter a good life, a normal life. Now strangers on the internet were calling her a bad mother, claiming she was pushing Maya too hard, ruining her childhood. The absolute worst were the TV psychologists. They appeared on talk shows discussing Maya like she was a case study, rather than a real child. They debated whether genius children should skip grades or stay with their age group. They argued about the pressure placed on gifted kids. They threw around terms like developmental concerns and social isolation, risks. None of them had ever met Maya, none of them knew that. She still watched cartoons every Saturday morning, or that her favorite food was chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. They just talked and talked, making her sound like some kind of science experiment. Dr. Chen tried to shield Maya from the worst of it. He refused interview requests. He told reporters that Maya was a normal child who deserved privacy. When a wealthy businessman offered to pay for Maya's college education at any school in the world, Dr. Chen politely declined on her behalf. But he couldn't stop everything. The online forums were particularly brutal. Thousands of people who'd never solved a complex problem in their lives were absolutely certain that Maya's discovery was fake. They picked apart the technical details. They questioned the institute's credibility. They demanded proof. Some of their criticism actually raised valid concerns. How could someone with no training in mathematics or physics solve such a complex problem? If she was really that smart, why couldn't she explain how she did it? The fact that Maya worked intuitively rather than logically made some people suspicious. The Institute decided to address these concerns head-on. They arranged for Maya to be tested by educational psychologists and mathematics experts from 3 different universities. Carmen was hesitant, but Dr. Chen convinced her it was necessary. "If we don't do this," he explained, "people will keep questioning whether Maya really did what we know she did. These tests will prove it." The testing took 2 full weeks. Maya sat in rooms with strangers who asked her to solve puzzles, identify patterns, and answer questions. She found the whole thing boring. Some of the puzzles were interesting, but most of the time, the adults just wanted her to explain things she couldn't put into words. The results, when they finally came, were extraordinary. Maya scored off the charts in spatial reasoning, her ability to understand and manipulate shapes and patterns in her mind. Her pattern recognition abilities were unlike anything the testers had seen before. In those specific areas, she performed better than most adults, better than most experts. But here's what confused everyone. Maya hadn't actually learned advanced mathematics. If you asked her to explain quantum theory, she couldn't do it. She couldn't perform complex calculations on paper. She'd never studied physics or computer science. What Maya had was something different, something rarer. She could see relationships and patterns that bypassed normal logical thinking, where most people, even smart people, had to work through problems step by step. Maya just looked and understood. It was like she was reading a language that everyone else was still trying to learn. Dr. Park described it best in an interview she reluctantly gave. "Imagine trying to explain to someone how you recognize your mother's face in a crowd. You don't measure the distance between her eyes or calculate the angle of her nose. You just see her and know. That's how Maya sees mathematical patterns. She doesn't calculate, she recognizes. But this explanation, while accurate, didn't satisfy everyone. Some people still insisted the whole thing was a hoax. Others claimed the tests were rigged. A few conspiracy theorists even suggested that Maya was actually an adult, with a rare aging condition pretending to be a child. The constant scrutiny wore on Carmen. She'd taken time off work to deal with the chaos, but money was getting tight. The Institute had offered to pay her for the time Maya spent with the research team, but Carmen refused. She didn't want anyone claiming she was profiting from her daughter's abilities. She lay awake at night wondering if she'd made terrible mistakes. Should she have stopped Maya from drawing on that whiteboard? Should she have pulled her out of the Institute the moment this started? Was she protecting her daughter enough? Or was she letting the world devour her childhood? Maya seemed okay on the surface. She still did her homework. She still played with her friends, though some had started acting weird around her. She still drew her patterns, though now people asked to keep them like they were valuable artifacts. But Carmen noticed small changes. Maya had stopped volunteering answers in class, even when she clearly knew them. She'd started saying "I don't know" to questions she could easily answer. She was making herself smaller, quieter, trying to blend in. One night, Carmen found Maya sitting on her bed, staring at a letter from a prestigious private school. The letter promised everything: the best teachers, unlimited resources, a chance to reach her full potential. "Do you want to go there?" Carmen asked softly, sitting beside her daughter. Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want me to?" "I asked you first, baby." "I just want things to be normal again," Maya whispered. "I want people to stop looking at me like I'm weird." Carmen pulled her daughter close, fighting back tears. "You're not weird. You're special." "I don't want to be special," Maya said, and her voice was so small, so tired. "I just want to be Maya." That night, after Maya fell asleep, Carmen made a decision. She called Dr. Chen. "We need to talk about protecting my daughter," she said firmly. "Really protecting her. No more tests. No more interviews. No more people picking apart her life like she's not even a real person." "I agree," Dr. Chen said quietly. "I should have done more from the beginning. Let me fix this." What happened next would surprise everyone, but not in the way they expected. Dr. Chen showed up at Carmen's apartment the next morning with Dr. Park and a lawyer from the Institute. Carmen had been expecting lectures or pressure, but instead, Dr. Chen did something she didn't expect. He apologized. "I got caught up in the excitement of the discovery," he said, sitting at her small kitchen table. "I didn't think enough about what this would mean for Maya. That was wrong." The lawyer, a kind-looking woman named Ms. Anderson, pulled out some papers. "We've drafted a protection plan. No more interviews without your written approval. No more testing unless you specifically request it. The Institute will issue a statement asking the media to respect Maya's privacy, and we're setting up a trust fund for her education, with you as the sole trustee. No strings attached. Carmen looked at the papers suspiciously. Why would you do this? Because Maya helped us, Dr. Park said simply. And because she's 8 years old. She deserves to be 8 years old. But there was more. Dr. Chen cleared his throat, looking almost embarrassed. The Institute is also offering you a new position, educational coordinator. You'd work with us to develop programs for gifted kids from working-class backgrounds, kids like Maya who might have talents nobody's noticed yet. The pay is... He named a figure that made Carmen's eyes go wide. You don't have to hire me just because of Maya, Carmen said quietly. We're not, Ms. Anderson assured her. You've raised an incredible daughter while working 2 jobs and dealing with circumstances most people couldn't handle. That takes skills we need. Plus, you understand something most educators don't. What it's like to be brilliant and broke at the same time. Carmen took the job. Not because of the money, though, that certainly helped. She took it because it meant she could be around more. She could keep an eye on Maya, protect her from the pressure, make sure her daughter's childhood didn't get completely swallowed by her gift. The Institute kept its promise about media protection. They issued a firm statement. They stopped responding to interview requests about Maya. When reporters showed up at the facility, security politely but firmly turned them away. Slowly, gradually, the media circus began to die down. News cycles moved on to the next sensation. But Dr. Chen and Dr. Park didn't abandon Maya. Instead, they became something unexpected: mentors. Not the pushy kind trying to mold her into something specific, the kind who just wanted to help her explore whatever interested her. They met with Maya once a week, always on her terms. Sometimes she wanted to look at their projects. Sometimes she just wanted to show them her drawings. Sometimes she wanted to talk about soccer or the book she was reading. They followed her lead and they discovered something fascinating. Maya's gift wasn't limited to quantum computing. It extended to almost anything involving patterns or systems. One day Maya wandered into the engineering lab, where a team was trying to fix a prototype machine that kept jamming. She watched for a few minutes, then pointed to a gear assembly. That piece is fighting with that piece. They're both trying to turn the same way at the same time. The engineers had spent 3 days trying to diagnose the problem. They made the adjustment Maya suggested. The machine worked perfectly. Another time, Dr. Park was playing piano in the Institute's break room during lunch. She was struggling with a challenging piece, hitting a wrong note in the same spot every time. Maya listened for a minute, then said, "The next note wants to go up, not down. It sounds like it should be down, but it's wrong." Dr. Park checked the sheet music. Maya was right. There was a printing error. The note should have been an octave higher. Most remarkably, Maya started getting interested in chess. Dr. Chen taught her the basic rules one afternoon, and within a week she was beating players who'd been studying the game for years. She couldn't explain her strategy. She'd look at the board and she'd just know where the pieces needed to go. But here's what was most important. Maya was still just a kid. She got bored during long explanations. She'd rather play tag than solve problems. She fell asleep during a documentary about artificial intelligence that Dr. Park thought she'd love. She cried when she scraped her knee during recess. Her friends at school slowly started acting normal around her again. The initial weirdness faded. Sure, Maya was the smart kid, but she was also the girl who laughed at stupid jokes and shared her snacks and always picked people for her soccer team even if they weren't good players. Mrs. Patterson figured out how to challenge Maya without making her feel isolated. She gave Maya special projects she could work on independently, but she also made sure Maya participated in group activities with other kids. Balance, that was the key. 6 months after the discovery, life had settled into something that felt almost normal. Carmen's new job meant they moved into a better apartment. Nothing fancy, but Maya had her own room for the first time in her life. There was food in the fridge. Carmen didn't have to work nights anymore. The scientific paper about the quantum computing breakthrough was published in one of the world's most prestigious journals. Maya was listed as a co-author, the youngest in the journal's 140-year history. But Maya herself never read it. She tried once but gave up after the first paragraph. Too boring. What Maya did read were books about climate change. Her teacher had done a unit on environmental science, and something about it had captured Maya's attention. She started checking out library books about solar panels, wind turbines, and renewable energy. One evening, Carmen found her at the kitchen table, surrounded by drawings. But these weren't random patterns. These were designs, detailed sketches of solar panels arranged in configurations Carmen didn't understand. "What are you working on?" Carmen asked. "Solar panels waste a lot of the sun's energy," Maya said, not looking up from her drawing. "Like more than half of it just disappears. But if you arrange them different and maybe angle them in a pattern like this." She gestured at her drawings. "I think you could catch more of the light that usually gets wasted," Carmen called Dr. Chen. Not because she wanted him to exploit Maya's idea, but because she genuinely didn't know if what Maya was thinking about made sense or if it was just the imagination of a child who didn't fully understand the science. Dr. Chen came over that night with Dr. Park. They looked at Maya's drawings for a long time, asking questions, having Maya explain her thinking. Finally, they looked at each other with that same expression Carmen had seen 6 months ago. That mixture of disbelief and excitement. "Maya," Dr. Park said carefully, "do you know you've potentially designed something that could make solar panels 30 to 40% more efficient?" Maya shrugged. "I just thought the pattern was wrong. The way people arrange them wastes the sunlight bouncing off the edges." This time, things were different. Dr. Chen and Dr. Park had learned their lesson. They didn't call press conferences. They didn't publicize Maya's involvement. They simply helped her develop the design properly, treating her as a collaborator rather than a curiosity. They brought in materials engineers and solar energy experts. They built prototypes. They ran tests. And Maya's intuition once again proved correct. Her panel configuration design increased energy capture significantly, but they kept Maya's name out of it during the development phase. Only when they filed for the patent did they list her as the primary inventor. And even then, they issued no press releases, gave no interviews. The media found out anyway, of course. It always does. But this time the story was different. This wasn't about a single moment of genius. This was about a young girl who'd taken her gift and used it to work on something she cared about. Something that could help the planet. The articles were less sensational this time, more thoughtful. "Young inventor tackles climate change. Solar innovation from unexpected source." People were still interested, but the tone had shifted from treating Maya like a circus act to recognizing her as someone doing meaningful work. And Maya, she handled it better this time. She'd learned from the first experience. When reporters asked for interviews, she politely declined. When classmates asked about it, she just said she liked science and moved on. She was learning something important. Her gift was part of who she was, but it wasn't all of who she was. She could be smart and normal. She could solve problems that stumped experts and still be a kid who loved soccer and hated broccoli. 2 companies approached the Institute about licensing Maya's solar panel design. The negotiations were handled by lawyers and business people, with Carmen carefully overseeing everything to protect her daughter's interests. When the deals were finalized, Maya had made more money than Carmen would earn in 20 years of work. It sat in a trust fund, managed carefully, waiting for Maya to grow up and decide what she wanted to do with it. But Maya's first request surprised everyone. She didn't want a bigger apartment or fancy toys or anything for herself. "Can we help other kids?" she asked. "Kids whose moms work as much as you used to? Kids who are smart but nobody notices because they're poor?" And that's exactly what they did. The scholarship fund was Maya's idea, but it became Carmen's passion project. They called it the Hidden Brilliance Initiative. And its mission was simple: find talented kids from working-class families and give them opportunities they'd never have otherwise. Not just kids who were good at math or science. All kinds of smart. Kids who could fix anything mechanical. Kids who understood music without lessons. Kids who saw the world differently and had ideas nobody expected. Kids like Maya, whose gifts might go unnoticed simply because their families couldn't afford expensive schools or tutors. Carmen worked with Dr. Chen and the Institute to develop the program. They partnered with schools in low-income neighborhoods. They trained teachers to recognize different types of intelligence, not just the kind that showed up on standard tests. They provided mentorship, resources, and financial support. The first group of scholarship recipients included 12 kids. There was a 10-year-old boy who could code better than most college students, teaching himself from library books. A 13-year-old girl who composed music that made professional musicians stop and listen. A 9-year-old who could diagnose what was wrong with broken electronics just by looking at them. Maya met all of them at the first orientation gathering. She was nervous beforehand, worried they'd expect her to act like some kind of genius guru, but the kids just treated her normally. They were more interested in talking about their own interests than asking her about quantum computing. She became friends with several of them. Real friends, not people who wanted something from her or treated her like she was fragile and special. Just kids who understood what it felt like to be different, to see things others didn't see. 3 years passed. Maya turned 11. She'd grown taller, her face losing some of its little kid roundness. She was in 6th grade now, taking some advanced classes but mostly staying with kids her own age. She'd learned to balance her abilities with her need to just be a regular kid. The quantum computing algorithm she'd helped discover was now being used by tech companies around the world. Her solar panel design was in production, installed on buildings across 3 continents. The Hidden Brilliance initiative had expanded to help over 200 kids, but if you asked Maya what she was most proud of, she wouldn't mention any of that. She'd tell you about the regional soccer championship her team had won, where she scored the winning goal, or about the short story she'd written that won a school contest, or about teaching her friend Diego, one of the scholarship kids, how to play chess. She still drew her patterns, still saw connections others missed, still occasionally helped Dr. Chen and Dr. Park with their work when something caught her interest. But it wasn't her whole life anymore. It was just part of who she was. One Thursday afternoon, Maya sat in the same break room where she used to do homework while her mother cleaned. But now Carmen worked in an office down the hall and Maya was here for a different reason. The institute was hosting a science fair for the scholarship program kids, and Maya had volunteered to help set up. Dr. Park found her there, sketching in a notebook. "What are you working on?" Maya looked up and smiled. "Just drawing. Nothing important." Dr. Park sat down beside her, looking at the patterns on the page. They were beautiful, intricate, flowing designs that seemed to dance across the paper. You know, you never have to apologize for just drawing. Not everything has to solve a problem or change the world. "I know," Maya said. "But sometimes people look at my drawings and immediately want to know what they mean or what they're for. Like they can't just be drawings. That must get annoying." "Yeah," Maya admitted. "Sometimes I miss when I could just draw and nobody cared." They sat quietly for a moment. Then Dr. Park asked, "Do you ever regret it? That night when you drew on the whiteboard? Everything that happened after?" Maya thought about it seriously. "Sometimes. When things got really crazy and everyone was watching me all the time. Yeah, I wished I'd just stayed in the break room, but..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But then I think about Diego and the other kids in the program. And I think about how my mom doesn't have to work nights anymore and how she smiles more now. And I think maybe it was worth it." "That's very mature of you," Maya laughed. "I'm 11. I'm not supposed to be mature. I'm supposed to be annoying and obsessed with my phone and thinking boys are gross. Do you think boys are gross?" "Absolutely," Maya said with complete seriousness. They are scientifically proven to be the worst." Dr. Park laughed. And it felt good. Normal. Like they were just 2 people talking. Not a scientist and a child prodigy having some profound mentorship moment. The science fair that evening was chaotic and wonderful. Kids presented projects ranging from apps they'd developed to sculptures that incorporated engineering principles, to research on local ecosystems. Parents crowded around tables, beaming with pride. Teachers chatted with mentors from the institute. Maya walked through the displays, genuinely interested in what everyone had created. A 14-year-old named Keisha had built a water filtration system using everyday materials. A 9-year-old named Tommy had programmed a game that taught kids about fractions without them realizing they were learning math. At one table, she found Diego presenting his project, a chess AI he'd coded himself. "Maya, come play against it," he called out. She sat down and played a quick game against his program. It was good. Really good. He'd taught the AI to adapt to different playing styles, something that required sophisticated programming. "This is amazing," she told him honestly. "Like I'm not even being nice. This is genuinely impressive." Diego's face lit up. "Really? You think it's good enough to develop further?" "Definitely. You should talk to Dr. Wu. He works with artificial intelligence. He'd probably have ideas about how to make it even better. As Maya walked away from Diego's table, she overheard two parents talking. They were pointing at her, whispering. She caught fragments of their conversation. That's her, the genius girl. Quantum computing. Maya sighed internally. This still happened sometimes. People who knew her story, who saw her as the 8-year-old from the news rather than who she actually was now. But then Carmen appeared beside her, putting a gentle hand on her shoulder. You okay? Yeah, Maya said. And she meant it, just ready to go home and be normal for a while. They left the science fair together, walking to their car in the evening light. In the car, Maya pulled out her notebook and started drawing again. Just patterns, just shapes that made sense to her. Mom, she said after a while. Yeah, baby? Do you think I'm always going to be known as the genius girl who solved that problem when she was 8? Carmen was quiet for a moment, thinking about her answer. Maybe. That's a big thing you did, and people don't forget big things. But here's what I know. You're going to do lots of other things in your life. Some of them might be even bigger. Some of them might be small and quiet and just for you, and all of them together, that's who you'll be. Not just one thing you did when you were a kid. Maya nodded, feeling better. Can we get pizza for dinner? Pizza sounds perfect. That night after dinner, Maya worked on a new project. Not quantum computing or solar energy or anything that would change the world. She was designing a better backpack based on weight distribution patterns she'd noticed. It would probably never be more than a sketch in her notebook, and that was fine. She'd learned something important over the past 3 years. Being smart was part of who she was, but it wasn't all of who she was. She could use her gifts when she wanted to, when something interested her or when she saw a problem she wanted to solve. But she could also just be Maya, a girl who liked soccer and pizza, who had good friends and a mom who loved her, who sometimes solved impossible problems and sometimes just drew pictures for fun. The world would always be interested in what she could do. But Maya was learning to be interested in who she wanted to become, and that was a different thing entirely. Years later, when reporters would ask her about that night when she was 8, standing at a whiteboard solving a problem she didn't understand, she'd always give the same answer. I just saw a pattern that needed fixing. That's all. The rest, that was everyone else deciding it was special. I was just being me. And in the end, being herself was the most extraordinary thing Maya Rodriguez could do.